In 1990, I jumped off the porch, marking the beginning of a journey that would change my life. By 1993, I had started carving out my name in the streets. My name is Drago, and my father was L.C. Martin Jr. It was my cousin Pat's boyfriend, Polo, who first introduced me to this life. Pat played a pivotal role as she introduced my sister Tamika to Antoine Jones, a prominent figure in the Black Gangster Disciples, BGDs. As they began dating, Antoine took me under his wing, almost like a big brother, as he never had any siblings himself. It felt like family. I brought my childhood friend Larry into the fold. We had grown up just 2 houses apart in a tight-knit community. At that time, many of our friends were caught up in the juvenile system, but Larry and I were still around. We attended our first 360, a BGD meeting together, where I met many key players in the game. One guy who struck me was a character known as Crazy. He had a wild look in his eyes, and there was an air about him that whispered of danger. Then there was Scarface, a dude whose skills lay in auto theft and rap. We clicked immediately since I had my own dreams of rapping back in the day. Scarface invited me to Peach's crib to hang out, so I decided to check it out. Arriving at Peach's on the Mid-East Side, I was taken aback when I spotted my old friend James, someone I had grown up with. Suddenly a car rolled by. I didn't think much of it until I noticed 2 guys in the front seat. Out of nowhere, the passenger reached out, pointing a gun at us and started firing. I felt my heart race, the world around me slowing to a crawl. I was staring dead into the barrel of that gun. My body went into shock, yet I somehow walked away without a scratch. That moment hit hard. It was my first drive-by, igniting a stark realization that this life wasn't a game. It was very real, filled with peril and unpredictability. Though I was eager to make my mark, I had to tread carefully in this dangerous world. Stay tuned for Part 2, Life in the Hood. I linked up with a crew, KB, James, Sean, Hootie, T-Bone, and Skate, among many others. We became a tight-knit group. One day, Hootie and I strolled over to KB's crib, where we met up with T-Bone and Joe Ski. KB had just gotten his hands on a gun from a robbery they had pulled off earlier, adrenaline coursing through me. Meanwhile, Sean, a big player in the dope game, had money flowing like water and guns to match. He handed me my very first .25 caliber handgun, and I felt a rush of power. It was a reckless decision, but I was young and dumb, riding high on that newfound feeling of invincibility. Eager to prove myself, I wanted to put that gun to work. One night, as I was walking toward the south side, a group of CPTs rolled by in their car, screaming out their crew name. My heart raced, but I held my ground and threw my pitchforks, our gang symbol, into the air. To my surprise, they hit the brakes and rolled back toward me. In that split second, adrenaline kicked in. I reached for my waist, pulled out the .25 caliber, and started firing. The car came to a halt as I squeezed the trigger. I kept going until I was out of bullets, and then I took off running for my life. Over the course of a month, I found myself involved in 10 separate shootings, each one deeper into the lifestyle I had chosen. But then came my last shooting, and it landed me in juvenile detention. The walls closed in on me, and eventually, I was sent off to boys' school, a place just shy of a prison for juveniles. I remember my first day vividly. Upon arrival, I was patted down and stripped of my clothes, leaving me feeling vulnerable and exposed. Next, I faced the barber, who shaved off my hair, a symbol of my freedom gone. Intake was brutal. My fellow detainees and I were made to sit in a chair with the TV blaring at full volume for a whole day. This ritual lasted 2 weeks. It struck me then that I was tangled in a nightmare that felt surreal. I felt trapped, like I was in some hellish limbo, with no control over my fate. All I could do was serve my time, reflecting on the chaos that led me to this moment. Stay tuned for Part 2. I linked up with The judge's sentence kept me in boys' school until I turned 18, but I had the option to honor 6 months of programs to reduce my stay. I knew that if I acted up and racked up write-ups, I would remain there for the full term. After 2 long weeks of orientation, sitting in that chair with my thoughts, I was finally moved to Cottage 12, my new home for the foreseeable future. In Cottage 12, I found camaraderie with 2 of my homies, Ace and CC. As fate would have it, the guy who owed him money stood in line, refusing to pay. Without warning, CC swung a punch that broke the guy's nose. It all escalated so fast. The entire dining room erupted in chaos as everyone jumped in to back CC. Boys' school became more than just a punishment. it turned into a place for reflection and boredom. I decided to do something about it. I began to pick up books, immersing myself in anything I could find. As the days turned into weeks, I settled into the rhythm of incarceration, but there were still moments of loneliness and an aching desire to return home. One day my sergeant, a tough but fair man, pulled some strings for me, arranging a 72-hour pass to go home. But just as fate would have it, the courts from my hometown called me in for another case related to the shootings back home. They dismissed the case, but I missed my chance to go home, and the disappointment weighed heavily on me. Time plodded on, and soon days became weeks, and weeks turned into months. I dove deeper into literature, tackling books like The Stolen Legacy by George James and The 48 Laws of Power. I even ventured into geometry, learning in a place I never imagined I'd be. Each page turned was a step into enlightenment and wisdom. My eyes started opening up. In this unexpected journey, I found not just knowledge but a sense of belonging that transformed my experience. As I neared the end of my time here, I realized it was more than just a punishment. It had shaped me in ways I never expected. April 20th, 1993 marked the day I stepped foot into the world again after my time in boys' school. It felt surreal. The conditions of my release echoed in my mind. No contact with anyone from back home, and I had to go to school. I figured that would be a cinch. I wasn't trying to mess with the police again. When my mom picked me up from the bus station, I was overwhelmed. The familiar yet distant sight of my neighborhood stood before me like an old friend. As I got home, my gaze landed on my little sister, Christine. She was barely a baby when I went in, and now she was walking and talking, this tiny whirlwind of energy who had just begun to discover the world. After I dropped my bags in my room, the nostalgia of being home washed over me. I quickly hopped into the shower, trying to scrub off the remnants of boys' school and the weight of change. Emerging, I threw on my Dickies and a blue flannel, feeling like I was slipping back into my old skin. But the streets were no longer the same. Stepping outside, I felt the pulse of the neighborhood anew. It was as if a different vibe had taken over. We used to be BGDs, but now, somehow we had dropped the B and rebranded ourselves as GD, a new identity in a world that had shifted while I was away. I told my mom I'd see her later and hit the streets, eager to reconnect with everything I had missed. I drifted through familiar blocks, but every corner seemed to whisper stories of chaos and change. The gossip enveloped me like a thick fog. Hootie, my homie, just got locked up, and the streets had been buzzing with tales of loss and violence. Did you hear about Folks Harvey? They say he got shot in the face. The thought sent a jolt through me. Harvey was one of the names that echoed in our circles, part of the crew. And Polo Man, they say he beat that guy nearly to death, and now he's locked up for it. The relentless cycle of brutality seemed so drastic. Then there were the whispers about big folks too, who caught a bullet in the nose. Life had moved on, but the cost had been steep. I couldn't shake the feeling that so much then changed since I've been gone. T-Bone and Ski were in jail for armed robbery. The folks said to me, then at that moment, two of the folks walk in and we all shake hands throwing up our gang signs. Dinky and Jamal, what's happening, G, I say to them. They say to me nothing but this G thing. And then we sit for a minute, chopping it up. Dinky then reaches in his pocket and pulls out some weed. He then rolls up a blunt, lights it up, and takes a big-ass hit and starts choking and coughing. Then he passed the blunt around the room. Now everyone's high as hell, laid back, while Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre's new album, The Chronic, is playing loudly in the background. I look at Jamal and say, where the folks at? He says to me the folks on Smith Street always keeps a whole bunch of baddies around. I then say to him, let's walk over there. I'm fresh out of boys' school. I want to see some baddies. They agreed, and we begin to walk. As we walk, the energy of the neighborhood surrounds us. Every step feels like a leap into a world that has continued without me. Yet somehow, I am still a part of it. I linked up with my homies, Dinky and Jamal, both down-ass G's known for always keeping a blunt lit. The air was thick with a mix of anticipation and that familiar street tension as we started walking to the spot where everyone hung out. But suddenly, we caught sight of a CPT, his hat tilted to the left, a telltale sign of a CPT. Old instincts kicked in, igniting that fire in me that I had for this G thing. We played it cool, knowing if we ran up on him, he'd likely take off. Instead, we hatched a plan to catch him off guard. Yo, CPT, we yelled. our voices echoing off the nearby buildings. He shot us a glance, his expression shifting, and then he started yelling it back, trying to act tough. But, as we closed the gap, his bravado slipped away. The moment he recognized me, his jaw dropped, that flicker of fear igniting our senses. Without a second thought, I lunged forward and unleashed a punch that felt like it had the weight of the world behind it. He went down, knocked out cold, a thud against the concrete that reverberated through the street. Dinky and Jamal exchanged wide-eyed glances, astonished. "Damn, Draco! We didn't even get to whoop him!" Dinky laughed, a mix of disbelief and exhilaration in his voice. Turning to Jamal, I smirked and said, "You still can get a kick in." Jamal wasted no time, delivering a swift stomp to the dude's face, leaving his mark. With adrenaline coursing through our veins, we started to walk away, leaving him slumped, asleep on the sidewalk. The thrill of the moment was intoxicating, but we knew it was just another day in our lives, existing on the razor's edge. "Let's hit the gas station for some chips and pop," Dinky suggested, and we headed there, still buzzing from our little showdown. Inside the gas station, the fluorescent lights mixed with the lingering smell of gasoline and snacks. It felt like home. As we browsed the aisles, a shadow moved past my peripheral vision. I glanced up only to find another CPT walking in, eyeing us with a wary expression. I looked back at him and said, "Do we got a problem?" He then opened up the gas station door and signaled for his homie to come in. His homie rushed inside the store and said to me, "What's up, Peoples?" Peoples is just another terminology that CPT uses. I then whistled for Jamal and Dinky to come join me, and then I turned to them and said, "Oh, y'all thought I was alone, huh?" Out of nowhere, Jamal throws a punch, and we all began fighting. The owner of the store comes out with the gun in his hand, screaming, "Get out of my store!" We all see the gun and take off running. The CPTs ran in the opposite direction as we did. Eventually, we stopped running, hyped up and excited about what just happened. Dinky then pulls out a blunt, lights it up, and takes a big-ass hit, starting to choke and cough as he passes it to Jamal. Jamal does the same thing and passes it to me. I then turned to Jamal and said, "I'm good, G," and then we continued our destination to where the rest of the folks is at. The night continued to unfold as we strolled towards the gathering, excitement still tingling in our veins. We spotted the rest of the folks chilling at the park, ready to share stories of our wild adventure. I linked on July 17, 1995, 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, I found myself in a place that felt like the calm before a storm. The heat of late July wrapped around me as I linked up with Jamal and Dinky at Dinky's cousin's house. It was a small, cluttered room, filled with the scent of weed and laughter. We huddled together on the worn-out couch, passing around a blunt. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls, and the smoke swirled in lazy circles above us. As the weed smoke filled the air, it turned into a cloud that softened the sharp edges of my thoughts, yet amplified the deeper ones lurking below. Beneath the laughter and the chill vibe, I wrestled with memories and regrets. I thought about the streets, the things I had done, the choices that danced on the thin line between right and wrong. I had put in a lot of work and done my share of dirt, but a voice inside me whispered it was time for change. I thought of my father and how he got killed 2 weeks before his 18th birthday. I heard stories from my family about his desire to turn his life around before he passed. I felt his spirit nudging me, challenging me to do better. At around 11 p.m., the excitement in the room surged as we discussed Tia's party. "You know there are going to be so many baddies there, right?" Dinky exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. A wave of laughter erupted, and Jamal added, "I heard she's got a pool. We've got to be the first ones there." Their energy was infectious, but my mind was still tangled up in deeper thoughts. We decided to make our way to Tia's, abandoning the lazy comforts of the house. As we walked, the streets felt alive with summer's heat, the sounds of laughter and music echoing around us. Dinky and Jamal kept talking, lost in a world of their own, joking about what would happen if they saw their crushes at the party. I smiled along, yet my heart raced with mixed emotions. Then it happened. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a black car rolling slowly, almost imperceptibly. It felt wrong, out of place against the backdrop of our carefree night. My instincts kicked in, and I turned to look more closely. In that split second, time seemed to stretch. A shadowy figure in the back seat leaned forward, revealing a machine gun aimed with shaky precision. Fear gripped my heart as adrenaline surged through my veins. Jamal and Dinky were oblivious, caught up in their laughter. unaware that danger was closing in. I couldn't look away, transfixed by the sight as the passenger reached for the weapon, a twisted grin on his face as he shared a joke with his unknown friends, labeled by our neighborhood as GDs. The urgency of the moment crashed over me as the noise from the party seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. To be continued. Stay tuned for the final chapter. Like and subscribe for the latest, newest stories. The moment was tense, electric. The air crackled with impending doom. Suddenly, the guy burst from the car, a wild look in his eyes as he brandished a machine gun. The sharp staccato of gunfire ripped through the air. Jamal, quick on his feet, took aim and fired 4 shots, his face a mask of determination before he bolted away, the need for survival kicking into overdrive. I raised my weapon, adrenaline fueling my movements. 4 shots erupted from my gun, but the fleeting satisfaction of firing quickly vanished as the shooter fixed his gaze on me, his finger tightening around the trigger. Panic seized me. My heart raced, and time seemed to stand still. The world blurred around me, the cacophony of warfare fading into a haunting echo. I was frozen, paralyzed, caught in the gravity of the moment. And then, just as I thought the end had come, it happened. A brilliant light flickered to life before me, a radiant barrier that felt ethereal, almost divine. Disbelief surged within me. I had always thought spirits and the supernatural were crazy talk, but now I was standing in the midst of one. "Draco, run!" Dinky's voice sliced through the shock, his urgency reigniting my will to survive. Panic outweighed my fear, and I turned on my heel, sprinting for my life. But then came the searing pain, like a hot sledgehammer smashing into my thigh. I gasped, the world spiraling into a haze of agony. I could feel warm blood seeping from the wound. I pushed on, driven by the primal need to escape, the face of death breathing down my neck. With each breath, the pain intensified, turning my body into lead. Lying there, I gazed up at the vast sky. My mind wandered through fragments of memories, the laughter of friends, missed opportunities, and dreams turned to dust. Then I saw him. Dinky. Relief flooded through me, mingled with panic. "Dinky!" I managed to shout, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm hit! Go get help!" Dinky's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw the reflection of my own fear mirrored in his gaze. He knew the gravity of the situation, so he ran to go get help. I only can hope that Dinky makes it back in time with help. Then all of a sudden I hear sirens from a distance. Then I started to see the siren lights flashing. Dinky, save me, based on a true story. As the paramedics approached, hope surged within me. I felt the warmth of life returning, yet the pain still echoed through every fiber of my being. They worked quickly, applying pressure to my wound, their hands steady even as chaos reigned around us. I was lifted onto a stretcher and brought toward the buzzing ambulance. Inside the ambulance, the sound of sirens blared in my ears, a stark reminder of the peril I had faced. I clung to the tiny spark of hope, praying the darkness would lift. As the ambulance sped through the night, I felt the pull of consciousness wavering. The rhythmic beep of equipment filled the air, heralding my fight for survival. The moment